Welcome back, once again adventurers, to Let's Play ChäoS Head. In the last episode, Shogun, the original Takumi Nishijo, gave a final warning to his quote-unquote counterpart. The existence, also known as Takumi Nishijo, the legendary gigalomaniac who was pretty much going to be inheriting the dreams of the original Takumi Nishijo, because, like it or not, Shogun doesn't have long to live. For not only has his own gigalomaniac powers drained him of the time he has left, but also the same is true of his other self, especially now that Takumi, or Taku, has finally awoken to his gigalomaniac powers and has at long last obtained his D-sword. But though Shogun had hoped to see his ordeal through to the end, he knew it was a long shot. And so, before he departed, Shogun told Takumi to finish what he started. In other words, to take the fight straight to the Nozomi group and its megalomaniacal leader, Ganishi Narose. Unfortunately, every plan does have a moment where things go awry. And in the case of Shogun and Takumi, that moment is now, because Ganishi has unveiled the third melt, courtesy of Noah 2. And as a result, things in Shibuya have drastically taken a turn for the worse. The grave voice of a newscaster reading out the news could be heard through the radio.
現在までに確認された死傷者の数は233人ですが、この数は最終的に3万人を超えるとみられ、気象庁の発表によりますと、今回の地震の規模は震度7、マグニチュードは 7.8 と関東大震災に匹敵する規模です。渋谷では建物の一部が倒壊し、大規模な陥没も発生している模様です。首都高渋谷線が高架の倒壊により全線通行止め。公共交通機関では山手線など全線が
Radio noise began to mingle with the newscaster's voice, and at last he stopped saying a thing.
ダメだわ。また聞こえなくなった。
And surprised to see Momose here out in this desolation. Although the Frisia building is definitely probably the last place that could be considered a safe haven, considering what has just happened. After taking the musty old portable radio in our hand and clenching it, tapping it and so forth, Momose let out an enormous sigh. Not surprising that radio signals are being lost here. Not to mention broadcast signals as well, given what's just transpired. Although I wouldn't necessarily call this an earthquake so much as a combination of an earthquake combined with the powerful force of a tornado that has swept through the entirety of Shibuya.
古いから使い物にならないわね。
Forcing a rueful smile, she looked to one side. There walked Ayase Kishimoto and Yua Kusunoki, both wearing expressions of exhaustion. Well, at least they're all doing well, and that they're safe and sound. An unfortunate shame that the same could not be said of Yasuji Ban. He may have been a slacking detective, but he was there when it counted, Most of the time, at least. But alas, he is gone. His life snuffed out by his traitorous junior, Mamoru, and Ayase is ready with her D-sword there, though of course, since Momose isn't a gigolomaniac herself, she can neither see nor observe this, but unless of course Ayase decides to real boot it, which she probably might do, because in the wake of the third melt, there are no telling what stops will be pulled by Ganeshi and Nozomi from this point forward. Because with all the chaos in the heart of Shibuya right now, there is literally no one and nothing to stop him, save for a handful of gigolomaniacs. But even they could never have imagined devastation and destruction on this unfathomable scale. Both Ayase and Yua's uniforms were completely soiled with dirt, making it readily apparent how much they had struggled to walk this far. However, the giant swords, D-swords, each of them held, contained not a speck of dust, and their grim glow remained completely unclouded. After the earthquake took place, Yua and Ayase had returned to Shibuya from Roppongi on foot, and by going even further to the Frisia office, they were able to join up with Momose. Expecting the missing Ban to come back, the three of them spent the night in the office, in a mixed-use building which tilted from the earthquake, and which had looked ready to topple over at any minute. But like Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park, it should be obvious to anyone that Yasuji Ban isn't going to be coming back anytime soon. But in the end, Ban hadn't shown himself. Momose proposed leaving Shibuya, but Ayase disagreed. And very good reason. Escaping is all well and good, but if Ganeshi's plans are left unchecked, Shibuya will only be the first in the line of destructive chaos.
グラジオールが目覚めたの。早く他の黒騎士と合流しないと。
Unfortunately, Momose isn't going to understand Ayase's cryptic metaphors, she asserted, tugging forcefully at Yua's hand, and headed off towards the wreckage-swamped central district of Shibuya. Yua and Momose were left with no other option but to go along with her. 7 in the morning. Less than an hour had passed since the brightening of the sky. There was absolutely nothing in the way of refreshing morning air. The wretched state that had been hidden by the darkness of night grew gradually more and more visible with the arrival of the sun. Now they were right in the thick of it. And along with the lonely sound of the wind, there was the sound of glass and other debris crashing down from all around. The neighborhood of Shibuya had transformed into a vision of hell. Not necessarily. There isn't fire and brimstone and mountains and other traditional... Well, there aren't rivers of lava, and that is a good thing. We do not have the time or energy to deal with rivers of lava. The roadways were broken to pieces, with asphalt projecting up. A number of buildings had collapsed, and the sides of the streets were buried in fallen wreckage. Most everything made of glass had cracked, and even a huge sign originally found on the roof of a building had fallen and was lying down there. But as terrifying as this was, the third melt is but the opening act, because Ganishi, with the power of Noah 2, has more at his disposal. Walk a little forward a little and they would come across corpses left strewn about every which way. It pained Momose every time she saw those bodies, and she would mentally press her hands together in their name. There were so many of them that, midway through, she made up her mind not to think about it, otherwise her own heart wouldn't last much longer. The people they occasionally passed were expressionless, and appeared to be wandering around on heavy feet without a destination. Several men cooperated in an effort to rescue those buried alive in the wreckage. There was very little they could do without heavy equipment. Oh, machinery, sorry. Momose looked again at the thing Yua had in her hand. Ah, so they have rebooted their D-swords, which actually, in hindsight, is probably for the best. There will most likely be looters, not to mention agents of Narose and those working for the Church of Light. A D-sword. Ayase had explained it to them. A sword one could draw as if by magic out of nothingness. Ban had been telling the truth. Yeah, literally no point in hiding it now, with all that's happened. Yua seemed startled and bewildered by the fact that she'd obtained one of these swords. And they're gonna need them. Ayase, walking ahead, didn't look back when Momose called to her. Her expression was tinged with impatience. Also, apologies to Momose for interrupting her there.
このディソードを持つ人はあなたたちを含めて全部で7人いるっていうこと？
Supposedly 7. There's Ayase, Yua, there's Senna, Kozue, Rimi Sakihata, and of course Takumi Nishijo and Nanami Nishijo. That, I believe, brings the total up to 7. So we actually do have our 7 Gigalomaniacs.
So you.
Unfortunately, Nanami is being held captive by Genishi, and in her current state, she is in no state to help anyone right about now.
他の人たちがどこにいるのかわかるの？
And as for where Rimi is, I honestly have no idea. Maybe she's still over there trying to negotiate with Genishi. We have absolutely no idea where Senna is, although I suspect she'll be heading for Nozomi headquarters, same as everyone else.
わからない。
だったら
感じるのよ、意志を。
Little does Ayase realize, but the will that she's been sensing this whole time was none other than that of Shogun, the original Takumi Nishijo. Although, of course, once he passes from this world, that gaze will be gone forever.
こっちで間違いないわ。
Ayase was an impenetrable fortress. Helpless, Momose repeated the same words for the nth time.
今むやみに歩き回るのは危ないわ。ひとまず安全なところに避難するべきよ。
Unfortunately, there was nowhere in the immediate vicinity that could even be remotely described as secure.
ダメよ。
And of course, as I said before, and as Ayase knows all too well, hiding is one thing, but hiding will not save you from the wrath of Genichi
時
Narose.
間がないの。
Ayase
もし
has
か
a
したら
point.
他の黒騎士だったかしら。その人たちだって避難場所にいるかもしれないでしょ。
そうですよ、岸本さん。私も避難場所に行くべきだと。
I understand your concern there, Yua. However, I'm with Ayase on this one. If Ganishi is left alive, is left to his own devices, things are only going to get worse from here on out. Ayase came to an abrupt halt, as if Yua's argument in support of it had taken effect. She narrowed her eyes. The ravaged streets of Dogan Hill, which cars could no longer drive along. She cast her eyes beyond it.
いた。
いたって何が？
At the end of Ayase's line of sight was the figure of a lone girl, walking toward them from the station. Well. Looks as if Ganishi has, surprisingly for the first time, actually held up his end of the bargain. For what little that's worth. In other words, he has exchanged Nanami Nishiryo for Rimi Sakihata, even though he has no need of them anymore. There are only two people in which he doesn't have code samples for, Yua Kusunoki and Takumi Nishiryo. And of course, in true Ganishi fashion, he has essentially left Nanami for dead. She wore a Surume Academy uniform, but it was even more tattered than Ayase's and Yua's. And she embraced the massive cross-shaped sword to her chest with her left hand alone. Her footsteps were uncertain, and she seemed about to collapse at any moment.
大変。
Her body jiggling as she went, Momose ran up to that girl, to Nanami Nishijou. Unfortunately, taking her to the hospital is almost certainly out of the question, because sadly, Nanami is bleeding out, callous as that sounds, and it is. But also the fact that even if the hospital was intact, taking her there is very dangerous, because the hospital is pretty much being controlled by Nozomi and the Church of Divine Light. She was concerned about the D-sword Nanami bore up, but for now she set aside the prospect of inquiring after it, and instead supported Nanami's small-statured form.
大丈夫？よく頑張ったわね。今病院に連れて行ってあげるから気をしっかり持つのよ。
As Momose spoke encouragingly, Nanami turned vague eyes in her direction. Yeah, she has lost far too much blood. And in her delirium, Nanami is still searching for the bangle.
なんて言ったの？
ママのバングルどこ？
Unfortunately, well, actually, believe it or not, I know I just said against it, but taking Nanami to the hospital might not, might work out in Nanami's favor, because Nanami's bangle and, on a more serious note, her severed hand is being held in the general hospital. Unfortunately, it's in the secret room, which is only accessible by Shogun and Rimi. So getting it is going to be a completely tall order. Yua and Ayase came dashing up to Nanami a little after Momose.
この子、西条くんの 妹さんです。
そう。黒騎士の資格があるのもうなずけるわ。匠の妹ね。
二人ともこの子を運ぶのを手伝って。なんとか病院に連れて行かないと。
Well, I suppose we have little choice in the matter.
痛い。
Nanami moaned in pain.
右
右手。
Momose, taking an offhand glance at Nanami's right hand, sucked in a breath. Unfortunately, Momose, it wasn't falling debris that severed Nanami's right hand.
だってひどい。こんな。
Witnessed the cruelty of Ganishi Narose firsthand. Yua and Ayase couldn't comprehend why Momose was so shaken up. There was a blood-stained bandage around Nanami's right hand, but it didn't seem to be such a dreadful injury. I think you should take a closer look at that bandage. But in Momose's eyes, Nanami's arm appeared as if having been hacked into at a bandaged wrist. Wait. I'm now confused. Was that actually a delusion all along? She had undergone some treatment, but the wound was still open. Ayase, blank-faced, tried to grip the fingers of Nanami's right hand, but her extended hand slipped clean through it without holding on to anything. Ah, now it makes sense. It's ironic that this time it's not Momose who is deluded, but two Gigolomaniacs. Hate to break it to you, Ayase and Yua, but Nanami's right hand is gone. Like a hologram, Nanami's fingers had no actual substance. A single drop of blood dripped from the crimson-stained bandage into Ayase's hand.
もうそう。
リミさんに助けてもらって。
But she did. But now she is once again Ganishi's prisoner.
リミさんって崎畑リミさん。
知ってるの？
ええ、西条くんのお友達の。
As she has thought of Takumi himself as the true culprit behind the New Gen incidents. Yua had investigated him in considerable detail. Naturally, she had also looked into Nanami Nishijo and Rimi Sakihata as they were in frequent contact with him. On the other hand, Ayase's usual cool expression grew minutely more severe when she heard Rimi's name. Yeah, looks as though she still has a grudge against Rimi. However, the culprit is neither Rimi nor Takumi.
崎畑リミも7人の黒騎士の一人よ。
そうなんですか？
Yes, indeed. She does wield a D sword of her own. Two of them, in fact. Ayase recollected what had happened at the hospital yesterday. The apologetic voice with which Rimi had addressed her came back to life. I think we're finally going to see what transpired and what led to what happened.
岸本さん、タクに近づかないで。
Of course. She was trying to stop Takumi from being reawakened, because she knew that doing so would ultimately be the final nail in Shogun's coffin.
目覚めさせたくないの。
君には自覚がないの。黒騎士の一人としての。
私が一人で何とかするから。
とても美しいわ、その思いは。でもそれは大いなる意志の望むことじゃない。私も望んでいないわ。あなた一人に全てを背負わせるなんて。
黒騎士運の話は今は置いときましょう。
Yeah, the less Black Knights and more Giggler Maniacs, but anyway.
とにかく早く病院に連れて行かないと血が止まらないわ。
Momose gently laid the handkerchief she carried with her against Nanami's wound.
すごい熱だし顔色も悪い。急がないと。
お兄に会いたいよ。
A single tear streamed from Nanami's empty eyes. A second later, it happened without warning. Suddenly, the street where Momose was standing caved in with a roar. As they lost the place to stand, Momose and the four others began free-falling, pulled down by gravity. As though they were plummeting towards the darkness of a bottomless abyss. As that hallucination overcame her, Momose forgot her rage and screamed. No one's going to hold that against you, Momose, but in any event, reaching a hospital now just became that much harder. But meanwhile, Takumi Nishijo has a final resolution that needs to be carried out to make Ganishi Narose pay for his crimes one way or the other. And that is going to be the end of this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Head, and when we return, adventurers, Takumi Nishijo is going to do just that. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.